The cargo ship broke apart in the atmosphere like a toy thrown against a wall. Kim Do-yoon felt the metal scream around him as the hull tore open. Fire bloomed across the control panel. The safety harness cut into his chest as the ship spun wildly through the clouds of Velrus 7. He tried to reach the emergency beacon. His fingers brushed the switch. But then, the ship hit the ground. Everything went black. When Do-yoon opened his eyes, pain filled every part of his body. He lay in twisted metal and broken cargo containers. Above him, the sky of Velrus 7 glowed purple in the fading light. He tried to move his left leg and screamed. It was broken badly. His ribs felt cracked. Blood ran down his face from somewhere on his head. The emergency beacon sat 3 meters away in the wreckage. It blinked a weak red light. Do-yoon crawled toward it, dragging his broken leg behind him. Each movement brought fresh agony. His vision blurred. Finally, his hand touched the beacon. He pressed the activation switch. Nothing happened. Do-yoon lay back in the dirt and looked at the purple sky. This was a mining colony planet. Someone would find the crash eventually. He just needed to survive until then. He closed his eyes and tried to stay conscious. Hours passed. The sky grew dark. Velrus 7 had 3 small moons that gave off a pale blue light. Do-yoon shivered in the cold night air. His throat felt dry as sand. He heard sounds in the darkness. Strange clicking noises. Something was moving near the wreckage. A light appeared. Then another. Do-yoon tried to call out, but his voice came as a weak whisper. The lights moved closer. He saw shapes in the darkness. They were not human shapes. The Thelm stood about 2 meters tall. Their bodies looked like large insects with smooth, dark shells that reflected the moonlight. They had 6 limbs, 4 for walking, and 2 that worked like arms. Their heads featured large compound eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. 3 of them approached the crash site carefully. One Thelm made rapid clicking sounds. The others responded with similar noises. They were talking. Do-yoon realized, through his pain. He had heard that the Thelm on mining colonies spoke their own language and rarely learned human speech. The Thelm moved around the wreckage, examining it. One of them spotted Do-yoon. It made a sharp clicking sound, and the others turned to look. They approached him slowly. Do-yoon tried to raise his hand in greeting, but the pain was too much. His hand fell back to his side. The 3 Thelm stood over him, their compound eyes reflecting the moonlight like hundreds of tiny mirrors. They clicked at each other rapidly. Then, the largest one turned and walked away. The other 2 remained, watching Do-yoon with what seemed like curiosity. Minutes later, the large Thelm returned. It made authoritative clicking sounds and gestured with its upper limbs. The message seemed clear to the other 2. They turned to follow the large one away from the crash site. But one Thelm remained. It was smaller than the others, younger perhaps. It looked at Do-yoon for a long moment. Then it looked back at the retreating figures of its companions. It made a soft clicking sound, almost to itself. The young Thelm moved closer to Do-yoon. It slid its upper limbs under his shoulders carefully. Do-yoon cried out in pain as the Thelm lifted him. The creature made gentle clicking sounds, almost soothing. It began to carry Do-yoon away from the crash site, in a different direction from where the others had gone. The journey felt endless. Do-yoon faded in and out of consciousness. He saw glimpses of the colony. Simple buildings made of dark stone. Mining equipment, sitting silent in the night. Finally, they reached a small dwelling on the edge of the settlement. The Thelm carried him inside and laid him on a flat surface. The interior was warm and lit by soft blue lights. Another Thelm appeared, slightly smaller than the one who carried him. This second Thelm made surprised clicking sounds. The first one responded with rapid clicks. They seemed to be arguing. Finally, the second Thelm approached Do-yoon. It examined his injuries with surprising gentleness. Its upper limbs moved carefully over his broken leg, his ribs, the cut on his head. It left the room and returned with containers of liquid and strips of clean fabric. The two Theln worked together. They cleaned his wounds. They set his broken leg as best they could and wrapped it tightly. They gave him water to drink and something that tasted bitter but made the pain fade to a dull ache. Do-yun felt his eyes growing heavy. Before sleep took him, he whispered the only words he could manage. "Thank you." Days blended together. Do-yun woke and slept in cycles. The two Theln cared for him constantly. They brought him food that his human stomach could digest. They changed his bandages. They helped him with everything he needed. Slowly, his body began to heal. As his mind cleared, Do-yun started to understand more about his situation. The young Theln who saved him was named Krieth. The other was called Silara. They were clutchmates, which Do-yun understood meant something like siblings or close family. They lived alone in this dwelling on the colony's edge. Krieth had a translation device that worked poorly but well enough for basic communication. Through it, Do-yun learned that the large Theln at the crash site was Velorn, the colony administrator. Velorn had ordered the humans left alone. The Theln colony operated under strict rules. They did not interfere with other species. They did not help outsiders. They kept to themselves and expected others to do the same. Krieth had broken that rule by saving Do-yun. If Velorn discovered a human living in Krieth's dwelling, there would be serious consequences. So Do-yun stayed hidden. During the day, when other Theln might visit, he remained quiet in a back room. At night, he could move around the dwelling more freely. Weeks passed. Do-yun's leg healed slowly. He could walk with a limp now. His ribs no longer sent sharp pains through his chest with every breath. He grew stronger each day. To occupy his time, Do-yun examined the dwelling systems. He noticed the water purification unit made strange sounds. Using simple tools that Krieth brought him, Do-yun opened the unit and found the problem. A filter had degraded and needed replacement. He fashioned a new filter from materials in the dwelling. When he installed it, the water purification unit ran smoothly and quietly. Silara noticed the improvement immediately. She made excited clicking sounds and brought Krieth to see. Through the translation device, they asked if Do-yun could look at other equipment in the dwelling. He agreed eagerly, grateful for something useful to do. Do-yun fixed their heating system. He repaired a broken comm unit. He improved their lighting so it used less power. Krieth and Silara watched him work with great interest. They asked questions through the translator about human engineering methods. 3 months after the crash, Krieth came home one evening making distressed clicking sounds. The colony's main mining drill had broken down. Without it, the colony could not meet its quotas. If they failed to produce enough ore, the company that owned the mining rights would shut down the colony. All the Theln would lose their jobs and homes. Velorn had tried everything to fix the drill. Nothing worked. The colony had only a week before the company inspectors arrived. Do-yun asked to see the drill specifications. Krieth hesitated but finally brought up technical diagrams on a display screen. Do-yun studied them for hours. Finally, he looked at Krieth and said through the translator, "I can fix it, but I will need to go to the drill site." Krieth and Silara clicked at each other rapidly. This was dangerous. If anyone saw Do-yun, Krieth would face punishment for harboring him. But their home, their entire colony, faced destruction if the drill remained broken. They decided to try at night when the site was empty. Under the light of Velris VII's 3 moons, Krieth led Do-yun to the mining site. The drill towered above them, a massive piece of machinery that dug deep into the planet's crust. Do-yun climbed into its mechanical systems with Krieth's help. He worked through the night. The problem was complex but solvable. A cascade failure in the drill's power distribution system had caused multiple components to burn out. The Theln had replaced the burned components but not fixed the underlying power distribution problem. Do-yun rewired the system. balancing the power load properly. He replaced the components again, this time with modifications to handle power surges. As the purple sun rose, Do-yun activated the drill. It hummed to life smoothly, its massive head beginning to turn. Krieth made sounds of joy. They hurried back to the dwelling before other Theln arrived for the day shift. When the workers found the drill operating perfectly, confusion spread through the colony. Vel-Orn examined it personally, but could not understand what had changed. The drill worked better than it ever had. The colony would meet its quota easily. That evening, Krieth received a message. A human rescue ship had picked up debris from Do-yun's crash. They were coming to Velris 7 to search for survivors. 15 years had passed since the crash on Velris 7. Captain Park Do-yun stood on the bridge of his trading vessel, the Morning Star, and watched the stars streak past as they traveled through faster-than-light space. His left leg still ached sometimes when the artificial gravity fluctuated, a reminder of that long-ago injury. The galaxy had changed in those 15 years. Humans had spread across hundreds of systems, building colonies, establishing trade routes, and making friends among the stars. The Morning Star carried cargo between 12 different worlds, dealing with 6 different alien species on a regular basis. Do-yun's crew was small but efficient. His first officer was a woman named Han Unji, who had served on military vessels before joining the merchant fleet. His engineer, Park Min-seo, kept the ship running smoothly, even when they pushed the engines harder than the manufacturer recommended. They were good people, and Do-yun trusted them completely. The Morning Star dropped out of FTL near a space station orbiting a blue giant star. The station served as a trading hub where dozens of species met to buy and sell goods. Do-yun guided his ship toward a docking port, following the traffic control instructions that came through in standard galactic trade language. Inside the station, the corridors bustled with activity. Humans walked alongside the tall, thin Aresh, who looked like walking praying mantises. The short, furry Bolvan ran shops, selling exotic foods. The crystalline Shane floated past, their bodies chiming softly as they moved. Even a few Theln could be seen, though they kept mostly to themselves as always. Do-yun completed his cargo delivery and stopped at a cafe that served drinks suitable for multiple species. He ordered something hot and bitter that approximated coffee. As he sat and watched the crowd, he thought about how normal all this seemed now. 15 years ago, seeing so many different species together would have amazed him. Now, it was just another day. His communication device buzzed. A message from his sister appeared on the screen. Dr. Park Ji-woo worked at a research station in a distant system, studying how different species could cooperate and learn from each other. She sent regular updates about her work. The message contained images of her latest project. The research station had brought together scientists from 8 different species to solve a problem with growing food in low-gravity environments. They had succeeded by combining knowledge from all 8 species. No single species could have solved it alone, but together they made it work. Do-yun smiled as he read. This was what the galaxy had become. Not perfect, but peaceful. Not without problems, but working together to solve them. The Galactic Concordat, a loose alliance of hundreds of worlds, maintained this peace through diplomacy and mutual benefit rather than force. Humans had earned respect in this galaxy. They were known as excellent engineers and fearless explorers. Human ships traveled to distant systems that others avoided. Human engineers fixed problems that stumped alien technicians. Human diplomats made friends easily with species that others found difficult. But humans were still a minor power. Their fleet was small compared to older species. Their territory covered only a tiny fraction of known space. In the grand scheme of galactic politics, humanity was the helpful newcomer, not a major player. Do-yun finished his drink and returned to his ship. They had another delivery to make, this time to a human colony world called New Busan. The journey would take 3 days through FTL space. As the Morning Star traveled, Do-yun thought about his time on Velris 7. He rarely spoke about it, but the memory remained vivid. Krieth and Silara had saved his life when their own rules said to leave him to die. They had risked everything for a stranger. When the rescue ship had arrived at Velris 7, Doyun had prepared to leave quietly. But Krieth had insisted on accompanying him to the landing site. The young Theln had wanted to meet the other humans, to see the rescue ship, to understand more about the species he had saved. At the landing site, Doyun had tried to think of a way to thank Krieth properly. Words seemed insufficient. Finally, he had given Krieth a small emergency beacon, the kind that could send a signal across many light years to reach Earth itself. "If you ever need help," Doyun had said through the translator, "any help at all, activate this. Humans remember their debts." Krieth had accepted the beacon carefully, holding it like something precious. They had said goodbye with the Theln gesture of respect, a crossing of upper limbs. Then Doyun had boarded the rescue ship and left Velris 7 behind. He wondered sometimes what had happened to Krieth and Silara. The Theln did not maintain regular communication with other species. Their colonies operated independently, connected to each other but isolated from the wider galaxy. Doyun hoped they were well. He hoped the beacon he gave them still worked after all these years. The Morning Star arrived at New Busan and delivered its cargo. The colony was thriving, with farms and factories covering the landscape. Human children played in the streets alongside young Bolvan, both species having grown up together in this new world. Doyun spent the evening at a restaurant overlooking the colony's main settlement. He ate a meal that tasted almost like the food from Earth and watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and pink. His communication device buzzed again. This time, the message came from Earth itself, from Admiral Lee Hyun-woo of the United Earth Defense Fleet. Doyun had met the admiral once at a ceremony honoring merchant captains who had served the fleet during a crisis. The admiral was known as a fair and intelligent commander, someone who valued honor as much as strategy. The message was brief. "Captain Park, I hope this message finds you well. I wanted to inform you that your sister's research station has been selected for expanded funding. The work being done there exemplifies the best of human contribution to galactic society. Your family continues to make Earth proud." Doyun smiled and sent back a short reply of thanks. It felt good to know that his sister's work was recognized. It felt good to be part of this peaceful galaxy where different species worked together and learned from each other. He did not know that this peace was about to end. Far away, in a region of space beyond the established trade routes, something stirred. The Vrex Empire had been watching the galaxy for decades. They had studied every species, learned every weakness, and planned their conquest carefully. The Vrex were reptilian, built for war. Their scales could turn aside many weapons. Their ships were fast and heavily armed. Their military discipline was absolute. They had conquered 12 systems in their home region and now looked outward with hungry eyes. The Vrex Military Council met in their war chamber on the capital world. The Supreme Commander, a massive Vrex with scarred scales and cold eyes, addressed the assembled generals. "The time has come," the Supreme Commander said, his voice a harsh rasp. "We have prepared long enough. The soft species of the Galactic Concordat have grown weak in their peace. They trade and talk while we have built an armada. We will sweep through their systems like fire through dry grass." The generals hissed their approval. They had grown impatient with watching and planning. They wanted action. They wanted conquest. "Where do we strike first?" asked one general. The Supreme Commander gestured at a holographic star map that floated above the council table. "Here, the Theln colonies in the outer reaches. They are isolated and poorly defended. The Concordat will not respond quickly to help them. By the time they organize a defense, we will control a dozen systems." The Vrex fleet began to move. Hundreds of warships left their hidden bases and traveled toward Concordat space. They moved carefully, avoiding established trade routes and sensor networks. They approached their target systems like predators stalking prey. The Theln colonies had no warning. They were mining settlements and small communities, focused on their work and their strict isolationist culture. They had no military vessels, only a few security ships meant to deal with pirates or accidents. When the Vrex arrived, the Theln barely had time to send distress signals before the attacks began. On Velris 7, Elder Krieth felt the vibrations through the ground before he saw the ships in the sky. He had lived on this colony his entire life, rising from a young worker to a leader responsible for hundreds of Theln. His dwelling had grown larger over the years, filled with the equipment and tools of his position. In a storage container, kept safe and maintained carefully, sat the emergency beacon that a human had given him 15 years ago. Silara had died 3 years past, but before her death, she had made Krieth promise to keep the beacon functional. She had clicked to him. We must honor it, even if we never use it. Now, as Vrex ships descended through the purple sky and weapons fire began to light up the horizon, Krieth retrieved the beacon from its container. His upper limbs trembled slightly. He was old now, his shell marked with the cracks and scars of many years. Other Theln in the colony sent desperate messages to the Galactic Concordat, begging for help. But Krieth knew the Concordat. He had followed their meetings and decisions through public broadcasts. They would debate and discuss and send diplomatic missions while colonies burned. He looked at the beacon in his limbs. The human had said, "Humans, remember their debts." Did they, after 15 years? Would one human captain even remember an old promise? Outside, explosions grew closer. The Vrex were methodical in their destruction. They were not here to conquer Velris 7, but to destroy it, to send a message of terror to other systems. Krieth made his decision. He activated the beacon and spoke into it, not knowing if the translation would work or if anyone would even hear. Doyun. Kim Doyun. You said humans remember. The Vrex are here. We are dying. I do not ask for myself, but for my people. We need help. He set the beacon down and walked to the window. In the distance, the mining facility where he had worked as a young Theln burned with bright flames. Vrex fighters screamed through the sky. The colony had perhaps a week before it fell completely. The emergency beacon's signal traveled faster than light itself, jumping through relay stations and communication networks until it reached Earth. The message was old technology, but it carried priority codes that put it directly into military channels. Admiral Lee Hyunwoo was reviewing fleet readiness reports when his communication officer interrupted him. The young officer looked pale and worried. "Admiral, we have received an emergency signal. Priority level maximum. It is using codes from 15 years ago." Admiral Lee frowned. "Put it through." The message played. The voice was alien, clicking and chittering sounds that the translator software struggled to process. But the words came through clearly enough. A desperate plea for help. A mention of a human name. A species called the Vrex. "Find out everything about this message," Admiral Lee ordered. "Who sent it, where it came from, and what these Vrex are. I want information in 1 hour." His staff moved quickly. Within 30 minutes, they had answers. The signal came from Velris 7, a Theln mining colony in the outer reaches. The emergency beacon was registered to a Captain Park Doyun, who had filed a report 15 years ago about a crash on that planet. Captain Park currently commanded a trading vessel called the Morning Star. The Vrex were an unknown species from beyond explored space. Intelligence reports suggested they had conquered several systems, but had remained isolated until now. 3 Theln colonies had already fallen to Vrex attacks in the past week. Velris 7 was currently under siege. Admiral Lee stared at the star map showing Velris 7's location. It was far from Earth, far from any major human settlements. Sending a fleet there would take days. By the time they arrived, the colony would likely be destroyed. "Contact Captain Park Doyun," Admiral Lee said. "I want to speak with him immediately." The Morning Star was making a routine cargo run when the message from Earth Command came through. Doyun took the call in his private quarters, surprised to be contacted directly by an admiral. Admiral Lee's face appeared on the screen. "Captain Park, I apologize for the urgent contact. We have received a distress signal from Velris 7. It appears someone there used an emergency beacon registered to you. Doyun felt his chest tighten. Krieth, he whispered. You know the sender? Yes, Admiral. 15 years ago, I crashed on Velris 7. A Theln, named Krieth, saved my life when his own laws said to leave me to die. When I left, I gave him that beacon. I told him humans remember their debts. Admiral Lee was quiet for a moment. The colony is under attack by a hostile species called the Vrex. 3 other Theln colonies have already fallen. The Galactic Concordat is meeting to discuss a response, but that will take weeks. We need to go now, Doyen said immediately. Admiral, I am volunteering my ship. The Morning Star can be there in 4 days. 1 trading vessel against an invasion fleet? Admiral Lee shook his head. Captain, I appreciate your loyalty, but that would be suicide. Then send more ships. Send the fleet. Send everything we have. Doyun stood up, his fists clenched. Admiral, this is not just about one Theln who saved my life. This is about what it means to be human. We tell other species that we keep our promises. We say that we honor our debts. If we abandon Velris 7 now, those words become meaningless. Admiral Lee studied Doyun's face for a long moment. You are right, Captain. Stand by. The communication ended. Doyun sat back down, his hands shaking. He had spoken boldly to an admiral, possibly ending his career. But he could not take the words back, and he would not want to. On Earth, Admiral Lee stood before the Defense Council. The room was full of officials who controlled Earth's military forces. They listened as he explained the situation at Velris 7. We should not get involved, one council member said. The Theln colonies are not our responsibility. We have a small fleet. We cannot risk it in a war that is not ours. Another member agreed. The Concordat will handle this. That is what they exist for. Well, Admiral Lee waited until they finished speaking. Then he said quietly, a species is judged not by how it treats the powerful, but by how it honors the powerless who showed it kindness. 15 years ago, a Theln saved a human life when it would have been easier to walk away. Now that Theln is asking for help, what does it say about us if we refuse? It says we are practical, the first council member replied. We cannot save everyone. We can save this one, Admiral Lee said, and others will see. If we help the Theln now, other species will know that humanity keeps its word. That has value beyond any single battle. The debate continued for hours. Finally, they took a vote. It passed by a narrow margin. Admiral Lee had permission to mobilize the fleet. He left the council chamber and immediately began sending orders. All military vessels in human space were to gather at Rally Point Echo 7. Every ship capable of combat, from massive cruisers to small patrol craft, was called to duty. But Admiral Lee went further. He opened a public communication channel that reached every human colony, every human ship, every human settlement across known space. This is Admiral Lee Hyunwoo of Earth Defense Fleet. 15 years ago, one of our people crashed on a distant world. Aliens saved his life when they could have left him to die. Today, those aliens are under attack. They are dying. They sent a signal asking for help because they believed humans remember their debts. His voice was calm but carried absolute conviction. I am calling on every human who can fly a ship to meet us at Rally Point Echo 7. We are going to Velris 7. We are going to show the galaxy what humanity does when friends are in danger. This is not an order. This is an invitation. Come, if you believe that promises matter. The response was immediate and overwhelming. On New Busan, Captain Bae Salmon commanded a frigate battle group that protected the colony. She received Admiral Lee's message and immediately began preparing her ships for departure. Her crew did not question the orders. They loaded weapons and supplies and made ready for combat. On a mining station near the edge of human space, Commander Nam Taeyang led a fighter squadron. His pilots were young and eager, trained for combat, but never tested in real battle. When they heard the Admiral's message, they cheered. Finally, a chance to prove themselves. Nam Taeyang organized his squadron and set course for Echo 7. Dr. Park Ji-woo heard the message at her research station. She called her director and requested immediate transport to Earth. "My brother gave that beacon to the Theln," she explained. "This started because of him. Because one Theln chose kindness over rules. I am going with the fleet," she explained. "I am going with the fleet." "You are a scientist, not a soldier," her director protested. "Then I will go as a scientist. I will take medical supplies. I will help the wounded. But I am going," the director relented. Within hours, Dr. Park Ji-woo was aboard a hospital ship, heading toward Echo 7. Across human space, the response continued. Cargo haulers volunteered to carry supplies. Mining ships offered their heavy equipment as weapons. Colony defense craft left their posts to join the fleet. Even retired pilots returned to service. Kang Minji had not flown a combat mission in 10 years. She had retired after the last conflict and opened a small restaurant on Earth. But when she heard Admiral Lee's message, she closed the restaurant and went to the nearest military base. "I want to rejoin the service," she told the recruiting officer. "Ma'am, you are over the standard age limit for active combat pilots. I have more flight hours than most of your current pilots combined. I can still fly. I can still fight. Sign me up, or I will fly there on my own." They signed her up. At Rally Point Echo 7, ships began to arrive. At first dozens, then hundreds. They came from every direction, every human settlement, every corner of human space. Military vessels took central positions, organizing the civilian ships into formations. Engineers worked frantically to arm the civilian vessels. Cargo haulers received missile pods. Mining ships were fitted with improvised weapons. Every ship that could possibly fight was given whatever weapons could be installed quickly. Captain Park Do-yoon arrived in the Morning Star and immediately sought out his sister. They met on the hospital ship, where Dr. Park Ji-woo was organizing medical supplies. "You should not be here," Do-yoon said, though he smiled as he said it. "Neither should half these people," Ji-woo replied. "But here we all are." They stood together and watched through the viewport as more ships continued to arrive. The fleet grew larger by the hour. Warships and cargo vessels, fighters and transports, new ships and old ones, all gathering for the same purpose. After 72 hours, Admiral Lee called a halt to the assembly. He could not wait longer. Velris 7 was running out of time. He reviewed the final count: 847 ships. It was the largest human fleet ever assembled. Most were not warships. Many were barely armed. But they were here. Every single one, crewed by humans who believed that promises mattered more than safety. Admiral Lee broadcast to the entire fleet. "You all know why we are here. A Theln saved a human life 15 years ago. Now, the Theln are dying, and they asked for our help. Some people say this is not our fight. Some say we should stay home where it is safe. But we know better." His voice grew stronger. "We are here because humanity understands something simple. When someone helps you, you help them back. When someone shows you kindness, you remember it. When friends are in danger, you answer the call. That is who we are. That is what makes us human." He paused and then said, "Every ship ready?" Across the fleet, 847 captains responded, "Ready, Admiral." "Then let us go, show the galaxy what humanity stands for." All ships jumped to Velris 7. The fleet entered faster than light space together, traveling toward a distant colony where the Vrex waited. The Vrex Supreme Commander stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the holographic display of conquered systems. 3 Theln colonies had fallen completely. 2 more were surrounded, and would fall within days. The campaign progressed exactly as planned. "Supreme Commander, we detect unusual activity in human space," reported one of his officers. "Large numbers of ships are gathering at a location designated Echo 7. The Supreme Commander studied the data. "How many ships?" "Current count is 790 vessels, Supreme Commander. The number continues to increase." "Interesting. Are they military vessels?" "Mixed composition, some military, but many appear to be civilian craft. They are moving toward the outer colonies." The Supreme Commander hissed with amusement. "Let them come. We have studied the humans. They are engineers and traders, not warriors. Their fleet is small and poorly equipped compared to ours. If they wish to die protecting the Theln, we will accommodate them." He turned to his tactical officer. "How many ships do we have in the Velris system?" 287 warships, Supreme Commander, plus support vessels. More than enough. Maintain the siege. When the humans arrive, destroy them quickly. It will teach the other concordate species what happens when they resist us. The Vrex fleet at Velris 7 continued its methodical destruction. They bombarded the colony from orbit, destroying infrastructure and terrifying the population. They did not need to conquer the colony, only make it an example. Other Theln settlements would surrender rather than face the same fate. Elder Krieth huddled with other colony leaders in a reinforced shelter deep underground. The explosions above had not stopped for 3 days. Food was running short. Water was rationed. Many Theln were injured, and their medical supplies were nearly exhausted. "We should surrender," one leader clicked desperately. "Perhaps they will show mercy." "The Vrex do not show mercy," another replied. "The colonies that surrendered were destroyed, just as completely as those that resisted." Krieth said nothing. He thought about the beacon he had activated days ago. Had the signal reached Earth? Would anyone come? He was old now, and perhaps his memories had made him foolish. Perhaps humans did not truly remember their debts. Perhaps the promise made 15 years ago meant nothing anymore. But he had to hope. Hope was all they had left. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light space at the edge of the Velris system. 847 ships appeared in formation, their engines glowing bright as they oriented toward the planet. On his flagship, Admiral Lee surveyed the tactical display. The Vrex fleet surrounded Velris 7 inches, a standard siege formation. Their ships were sleek and dangerous-looking, built for combat. Intelligence reports showed they possessed shield technology that could absorb most conventional weapons. "Admiral, we are being hailed by the Vrex fleet commander," his communication officer reported. "Put it through." The Vrex commander appeared on screen. His scaled face showed contempt. "You are human fleet. Why you come here?" Admiral Lee spoke calmly. "You are attacking our friends. We have come to make you leave." The Vrex commander hissed with laughter. "Your friends? The Theln do not have friends. They keep to themselves, as they always have. You humans are foolish to die for species that means nothing to you." "They mean something to us," Admiral Lee said. "They showed kindness to one of our people. That is enough. Then you will die with them. My fleet outnumbers yours. My ships are superior. You have no chance of victory. I give you one opportunity to leave before I destroy you." Admiral Lee smiled slightly. "I appreciate the offer, but I must decline. You see, you are making a mistake common to many military minds. You are counting ships and comparing weapons, but you are missing something important. And what is that, human? You asked why we came here. You said the Theln mean nothing to us. But that is wrong. Every single human in this fleet is here because they believe promises matter, because they believe that when someone shows you kindness, you repay it. We are not here because we have to be. We are here because we choose to be. And that makes us very, very dangerous." The Vrex commander growled. "Brave words from dead species. All vessels. Attack formation. Destroy the human fleet." The Vrex ships moved with precision, forming attack wings that accelerated toward the human formation. Their weapons charged, ready to fire. Admiral Lee watched them come. All ships, execute Plan Delta. Let us show them what human engineers can do. The human fleet split into 3 groups. The military vessels formed the center. A solid wall of firepower. Captain Bae Somin's frigate battle group took the left flank, moving fast to protect the civilian ships. Commander Nam Taeyong's fighter squadron launched from carriers and spread out in a swarm formation. The civilian vessels, armed with whatever weapons the engineers could install, formed the right flank. Cargo haulers, mining ships, even the hospital vessels moved into position. Every ship had a role. Every captain knew what to do. The Vreks opened fire first. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the human fleet. The human shields absorbed some hits, but several ships took damage. One frigate on the left flank exploded. Its crew lost in an instant. But the humans did not break formation. They closed the distance and returned fire. This was when the Vreks learned their first lesson about humans. Human weapons were not the most powerful in the galaxy, but they were diverse. Every ship carried different armaments. The Vreks shields, which were calibrated to resist standard weapons, suddenly faced missiles, lasers, railguns, plasma cannons, and weapons that had been improvised in the last 3 days. The shields flickered and weakened under the mixed assault. Several Vreks ships took damage. The Vreks commander ordered his fleet to adjust shield frequencies, but every time they adapted, the humans changed their attack patterns. Captain Bae Somin led her frigate group in a flanking maneuver that had been developed by human strategists during the last conflict. Her ships moved in a spiral pattern that confused Vreks targeting systems. When they reached optimal range, all 12 frigates fired simultaneously at a single Vreks cruiser. The concentrated firepower overwhelmed its shields, and the cruiser exploded. Commander Nam Taeyong's fighter squadron demonstrated the second lesson about humans. His pilots flew in swarm tactics that no military manual would approve. They broke formation, scattered, and attacked from unpredictable angles. Vreks point defense systems could not track so many small, fast-moving targets, all acting independently. The fighters got through the defensive screens and launched missiles at close range. Vreks ships, built to fight other large vessels, struggled to hit the small human fighters. More Vreks ships took damage. On the Morning Star, Captain Park Do-yoon commanded a group of civilian vessels in what looked like a chaotic attack. Cargo haulers and mining ships flew in loose formation, launching whatever weapons they carried. It looked disorganized and desperate, but it was neither. The civilian ships had been fitted with specialized weapons designed to disrupt ship systems rather than destroy hulls. Mining lasers calibrated to interfere with shield generators. Electromagnetic pulse weapons from cargo hauler defense systems. Even tractor beams from salvage vessels, all aimed at making Vreks ships easier targets for the military vessels. The Vreks commander watched his fleet take losses and could not understand how it was happening. The humans should not be winning. His ships were superior. His weapons were more powerful. But somehow, the human fleet was adapting faster than his own. Concentrate fire on their flagship, he ordered. Kill their admiral, and they will break. A squadron of Vreks battleships targeted Admiral Lee's command vessel. 20 ships focused their weapons on a single target. The shields on the human flagship could not withstand such assault. They collapsed, and the hull began to take direct hits. But before the Vreks could destroy the flagship, something unexpected happened. A dozen civilian ships, including cargo haulers and a large mining vessel, moved between the Vreks squadron and the Admiral's flagship. They took the hits themselves, sacrificing their own ships to protect their commander. The mining vessel, a massive ship called the Iron Mountain, rammed directly into the lead Vreks battleship. Both vessels exploded in a massive fireball. The cargo haulers absorbed fire meant for the flagship until their hulls breached and they vented atmosphere. Admiral Lee's flagship, damaged but functional, pulled back to a safer position. New ships immediately moved to fill the gap in the formation. The Vrex commander stared at his display in disbelief. They sacrifice themselves for one ship? This is madness. His tactical officer clicked nervously. Supreme Commander, we have lost 47 vessels. The humans have lost 32. This battle is not progressing as predicted. I can see that, the commander snapped. Adjust shields to counter their mixed weapons. Focus fire on military targets only, and deploy the reserve squadrons. More Vrex ships entered the battle from orbital positions around Velris 7. The human fleet was now truly outnumbered, but they did not retreat. On the hospital ship, Dr. Park Ji-woo worked frantically to treat wounded from damaged vessels. Rescue shuttles brought in crew members from destroyed ships. She moved from patient to patient, human and alien both, saving everyone she could. A young pilot was brought in with severe burns. As Ji-woo worked on him, the pilot kept saying, "Get me back to my fighter. I can still fly. I can still fight." "You will fly again," Ji-woo assured him. "But first, you heal." Through the viewport, she could see the battle continuing. Ships exploded in bright flashes. Weapons fire crisscrossed space like deadly fireworks. People were dying out there. Her brother was out there somewhere in the Morning Star. But all she could do was keep working, keep saving the ones she could reach. The battle raged for hours. Both fleets took heavy losses. The space around Velris 7 became a graveyard of broken ships. But slowly, the tide began to turn. Human weapons had one final advantage. Human engineers never stopped innovating. On every ship that survived long enough, engineers were modifying weapons, adjusting tactics, and finding new ways to hurt Vrex vessels. They discovered that Vrex shields regenerated slowly after taking damage. So human ships began coordinating their attacks, hitting the same target in waves to prevent shield regeneration. They learned that Vrex ships had weak points near their engine sections. Fighter squadrons began targeting those areas specifically. They found that the Vrex command structure was rigid. When a Vrex officer died, his subordinates waited for orders from higher command before acting. Human ships targeted Vrex command vessels, creating chaos in the enemy formation. Piece by piece, the human fleet was learning how to fight the Vrex, and with every lesson learned, they became more effective. The Vrex commander realized he was losing. "Retreat," he ordered. "All ships, withdraw from the system." But Admiral Lee was not finished. "All ships, pursuit formation. We are not letting them escape to attack another colony." The human fleet chased the retreating Vrex through the system. They destroyed ships that were too damaged to keep up with the main fleet. They hounded the Vrex all the way to the system's edge. Finally, at the jump point where the Vrex would enter faster than light space, Admiral Lee called a halt. "Let them go. Let them carry a message back to their empire." The surviving Vrex ships jumped away. Running from the battle they thought they would easily win. The purple sky of Velris 7 filled with human ships as the fleet descended toward the colony. Elder Krieth watched from the shelter entrance, his compound eyes reflecting the lights of hundreds of vessels. He had lived through 3 days of bombardment, convinced that death would come from above. Now salvation came from above instead. Tears would have run down his face if Theln could cry. Instead, he made clicking sounds of joy and disbelief. They had come. The humans had actually come. Captain Park Do-yoon brought the Morning Star down near the colony's main settlement. The landing gear touched the scorched earth with a gentle thump. Do-yoon opened the cargo bay doors and ran down the ramp, his leg only slightly limping after all these years. Theln emerged from underground shelters, moving carefully through the rubble of their destroyed homes. They clicked to each other in confusion and hope, not understanding why so many ships had arrived. Do-yoon searched the crowd. He was looking for one specific Theln among hundreds. Then he saw him. An elderly Theln, with a cracked shell, moving slowly, but with dignity. Their eyes met across the devastated ground. Krieth approached Doyun. For a moment, neither moved. Then, Doyun stepped forward and crossed his arms in the Theln gesture of respect. The same gesture Krieth had taught him 15 years ago. Krieth returned the gesture, his upper limbs trembling slightly. Through a translation device he carried, his words came through clearly. You came. I sent the signal. And you came. You saved me when no one else would, Doyun replied simply. Did you think I would forget? I saved one human. You brought 800 ships. I brought friends. Every human in this fleet came because they believed that kindness should be repaid. You taught me that when you risked everything to save my life. Around them, human crew members began emerging from ships. They brought medical supplies, food, and equipment to help rebuild. Dr. Park Ji-woo arrived with medical teams, immediately setting up treatment stations for wounded Theln. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo landed his shuttle near the main settlement and walked through the ruins. He saw the destruction the Vrex had caused and the resilience of the Theln who had survived it. He met with colony leaders to assess what help was needed. We have shelter facilities on our ships, Admiral Lee explained through translators. We can evacuate your most vulnerable citizens until the colony can be rebuilt. We have engineers who can help repair your infrastructure. We have supplies that we will share freely. The Theln leaders clicked among themselves, uncertain. They were not accustomed to accepting help. Their culture prized independence and self-sufficiency, but their colony was in ruins, and their people were suffering. Finally, the eldest among them spoke. Why do you help us? We are not your allies. We have no treaty with humanity. We offer you nothing in return. Admiral Lee smiled. One of your people saved a human life 15 years ago, when it would have been easier to let him die. That is reason enough. We do not help you, expecting payment. We help you because it is the right thing to do. The evacuation began immediately. Human ships transported injured and vulnerable Theln to medical facilities. Engineers assessed the damage to the colony's systems and began making repairs. Supply ships unloaded food, water, and building materials. Captain Bae Salmon organized defensive patrols around the system in case the Vrex returned. Her frigate group established a perimeter and set up early warning sensors. She would not let the Vrex surprise them again. Commander Nam Taeyang's fighter squadron flew reconnaissance missions to neighboring systems, checking on other Theln colonies that had been attacked. They found devastation but also survivors. More human ships diverted to help those colonies as well. On the hospital ship, Dr. Park Ji-woo worked alongside Theln medical personnel. Language barriers made communication difficult, but the universal language of helping the injured transcended words. She showed Theln doctors human medical techniques. They showed her Theln methods. Together, they saved lives that neither could have saved alone. As the sun set on Velris 7, casting the landscape in shades of purple and orange, Krieth and Doyun sat together on a pile of rubble that had once been the colony's main administrative building. Your people lost ships saving mine. Krieth clicked softly. I saw them sacrifice themselves during the battle. Humans died protecting Theln they had never met. They died protecting friends, Doyun corrected gently. You became my friend when you saved me. That made the Theln friends to humanity. We protect our friends. I do not understand this about humans. The galaxy does not work this way. Species pursue their own interests. They form alliances based on benefit. But you came here for memory of one kindness 15 years past. Doyun looked at the sunset, thinking about how to explain. Humans believe that what we do defines us more than what we say. If we claim to value loyalty and honor, but we abandon friends when helping them is difficult, then those are just empty words. You showed me that kindness can exist between species. I wanted to show you that loyalty can exist too. Krieth made a sound that might have been a laugh. One human crash lands on my colony. I break rules to save him. Years later, he brings a fleet to save my species. The consequences of small choices become very large. The best consequences usually do. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the human ships move across the sky. Cargo haulers, delivering supplies, medical shuttles, transporting patients, fighter patrols, keeping watch, all working together to help a species that most humans had never heard of until a week ago. News of the battle spread across the galaxy rapidly. The Galactic Concordat had still been debating how to respond to the Vrex invasion when word arrived that humans had already fought and won. Species that had been preparing to surrender border territories in exchange for peace suddenly reconsidered. Representatives from dozens of species sent messages to Earth, all asking variations of the same question. Why had humans fought for the Theln? Admiral Lee's response was broadcast widely. A. Theln saved a human life 15 years ago. This week, humans saved Theln lives in return. It is really that simple. We keep our promises. We remember kindness. We stand with our friends. The message resonated. Species that had viewed humans as minor players suddenly saw them differently. Here was a species that would send their entire fleet to honor a single debt. Here were people who valued loyalty over safety. Within days, representatives from other species began arriving at Earth, requesting meetings and proposing alliances. The Aresh, the Bolvan, the Shene, and a dozen other species wanted to establish formal relationships with humanity. On Velris 7, reconstruction continued for weeks. Human engineers worked alongside Theln workers to rebuild the colony. They improved on the original designs, incorporating both human and Theln engineering principles. The result was a colony that was stronger than it had been before the attack. Elder Krieth walked through the rebuilt settlement with Doyun on the day before the human fleet was scheduled to depart. The mining equipment was running again. Homes had been repaired or rebuilt. Life was returning to normal. I must tell you something, Krieth clicked as they walked. When Velorn ordered us to leave you to die 15 years ago, I almost obeyed. It would have been easier. It would have followed our rules. But Silara said something that changed my mind. What did she say? She said that rules exist to help us live together. But sometimes following rules means choosing cruelty over kindness. She asked which was more important, following rules or being good. I decided that being good mattered more. Doyun smiled. Silara was wise. She was. She died 3 years ago. But before she passed, she made me promise to keep your beacon maintained. She said it was a gift of trust, and we must honor it. I am glad I kept that promise. She was. Let's come. So am I. They reached the edge of the settlement, where the Morning Star sat on its landing pad. Other human ships were already lifting off, beginning their journey home. The mission was complete. The Theln were safe. The Vrex had been driven away. Admiral Lee Hyunwoo gathered his fleet commanders for a final meeting aboard his flagship. Captain Bae Somin, Commander Nam Tae-young, Dr. Park Ji-woo, Captain Park Do-yoon, and dozens of others who had led parts of the fleet during the battle. We lost 96 ships, Admiral Lee said solemnly. More than 1,000 humans died in this battle. They died fighting for people they did not know, in a system far from home, because they believed that promises matter. I want every one of their names recorded. I want monuments built. I want their families to know that they died as heroes, defending the values that make humanity worth defending. The commanders nodded in agreement. Every life lost would be remembered. Every sacrifice would be honored. But I also want you to understand what we accomplished here. Admiral Lee continued. We did not just save one Theln colony. We sent a message to the entire galaxy. We showed them who humans are. We demonstrated that we keep our word, that we honor our debts, that we stand with our friends no matter the cost. He looked around the room at the tired, proud faces of his commanders. The galaxy will remember Velris 7. They will remember that when others debated and delayed, humans acted. When others chose safety, we chose honor. And that will matter far more than any treaty or alliance we could have negotiated. Captain Bay Salmon spoke up. Admiral, I have received communications from 37 different species requesting formal meetings with Earth. They want us as allies. Admiral Lee smiled. Of course they do. They want friends who will actually come when called. That is what we showed them we are. But we must be careful. Let us choose our allies as carefully as we choose our actions. We stand with those who share our values, not simply those who offer us advantage. The meeting concluded, and the commanders returned to their ships. The human fleet began its journey home, leaving behind a grateful Theln colony and a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. On the day of departure, Krieth stood with all the Theln colonists to watch the human ships lift off. They had organized a ceremony, the first time in Theln history that their species had publicly honored outsiders. As each ship rose into the purple sky, the Theln crossed their upper limbs in the gesture of respect. Hundreds of Theln, all honoring the humans who had saved them. It was a sight that would have been unimaginable just weeks before. The Morning Star was the last to leave. Doyun stood in the cargo bay door as the ship lifted off, looking down at the colony. Krieth stood in the center of the settlement, his arms crossed in respect, watching his friend depart. Through the communication system, Krieth's voice came through one last time. Thank you, Kim Doyun. Thank you for remembering. Thank you, Krieth. Doyun replied. Thank you for teaching me what it means to choose kindness over rules. The Morning Star rose into the sky and joined the departing fleet. Together, 847 ships turned toward home, leaving behind a colony that would remember them forever. Word of the Battle of Velris 7 continued to spread across the galaxy for months afterward. The Vrex Empire, humiliated by their defeat, retreated to their home systems and did not attempt further invasions. Other species that had been considering aggressive expansion reconsidered when they learned what had happened to the Vrex. The Galactic Concordat reformed itself, incorporating human principles of mutual defense and loyalty into its charter. Admiral Lee Hyun-woo was offered a seat on the Concordat Council, which he accepted. For the first time, humans had a voice in galactic governance, but perhaps the most important change was in how species viewed each other. The old ways of purely transactional relationships began to shift. Species that had kept to themselves started reaching out. Alliances formed based on shared values, rather than just mutual benefit. 1 year after the battle, a monument was erected on Velris 7. It stood in the center of the rebuilt colony, visible from every direction. The monument showed a human and a Theln with their arms crossed in respect, facing each other as equals. The inscription was written in both human and Theln languages. They once helped a human. Years later, an entire fleet answered the call. Let this remind us that the smallest act of kindness can change the galaxy. Elder Krieth stood before the monument on the day of its dedication. He was very old now, and moved slowly. But he came every day to look at the monument and remember. Sometimes he thought about that night 15 years ago when he found a dying human in the wreckage. He thought about his decision to help despite the rules that said not to. He thought about how one small choice had led to everything that followed, and he was glad. Glad that he had chosen kindness. Glad that his faith in human gratitude had been rewarded. Glad that he had lived to see the galaxy change, because two species learned to be friends. As the purple sun set on Velris 7, casting long shadows across the monument, Krieth crossed his arms one final time in respect, not to any human present, but to the memory of what they had done together. A human and a Theln, teaching the galaxy that sometimes the most powerful force in the universe is simply keeping a promise.